we're live. I'm here with Heather, the Heat Hardy. I'm actually, before we get started, I told you this a little bit when I first texted you about it. When I first started this podcast about 2.5 months ago now, you were for sure one of the main people I was hoping to get on. And I've known you for a little while now. You've given me a few boxing lessons. Can't say that I'm too good at it, but it's been a pleasure to get to know you, and I'm actually very honored to have you on. So thank you for being here.
I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
So as I like to do it, as I said to you a couple minutes ago, if there's something that the world doesn't know about you, there's a lot about you on the internet, on social media, but if there's something that people don't know about you.
I was trying to think this whole time of a story. I think I'm always telling my friends hey, that's one thing nobody knows about me. So if I die, you have to tell them. So I'll tell you 2 things.
Go.
I'm really funny. Most people don't know I'm funny, but I'm actually funny. And I'm always the funniest one out of all my friends. Well, maybe not the funniest, but where everyone's always laughing at me. And I have key anxiety. I have this thing where if I'm not holding my keys, I get worried that I lost them. So I always like to have them where I can see them. And if I'll be out with my friends or something and I'll get this look on my face, I go, oh God, Heather, where are your keys?
Well, good thing you have your keys right in front of you.
They're right here on the desk.
I love it. Do you remember the first fight you got into? Street fight or other?
It's hard to say, where I was when I was a kid, we would always get in little scraps and somebody's mom would come out and pull us apart or beat us up. So I was probably in first or second grade.
Do you feel like you always had the fighter in you, or was there a moment in your life kind of early on that you there was this switch?
I don't know what it's like to not know how to fight.
Okay.
So I suppose that's not something I could explain to you, because it's one of them things it's trying to explain to somebody how you could see, right? You just always did it.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, you took up boxing not too long ago. Was it 9 years now?
It's been 9 years. Boxing wasn't something that was available when I was a kid. I've always been a fighter. I've always been scrappy. I've always been real tough. Even as far as being on the softball field, sliding into second base on cement, wearing shorts, I always gave everything I have. So boxing wasn't available to me outside 9 years ago, but had it been when I was a kid, I could only imagine how good I'd be right now.
And speaking of where you're at right now, since you've only literally been boxing 9 years, which is incredible when you think about it. Do you feel since you started later, do you feel like you're at the midpoint of your career, or do you feel like you're more on the tail end, or how would you kind of gauge that?
Well, I'm 37. I feel like I've fought a whole bunch of girls, and there's only a handful of girls left where it makes sense for me, in boxing anyway. So I'm not one of them fighters who plan on staying around forever. I think I have goals. I have a couple girls I have in mind, and outside of them, I'll move on to something else.
Other than the things that we can't get into, are there a few girls that you're interested in fighting with next?
Well, my number one is Jelena Mavenovic in Canada. She holds the WBC and WBA title. And in the beginning of January, there was talks of us doing this unification bout because I have the WBO title, and Showtime was going to cover it. She demanded money. They were going to give her money, and then it fell through. And she said, well, why don't we do the fight in Canada? And I thought, okay, well, show me the money. I assumed that it would be the same kind of pay that she demanded to come to New York that they would give me there, and they offered me 1/6 of what she was going to get to fight here in New York. And my manager said to them, we're not going to even start negotiating until, anything below X amount of dollars. And they said, okay. And at the time I was being offered the Bellator fight at the Garden. And they actually offered me about $5,000 less than what Bellator offered me. But when I weighed everything out, fighting at the Garden, being on the Zone, getting sponsorships, being home, this is an away fight I would have to fly to. They were only putting me up for 4 days. I had to weigh it out. And if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. And I know she felt the type of way after I didn't take that fight, but it's come on. You can't tell me I'm scared. I'm jumping in the cage. I don't even know what I'm doing. This is a business, you know? So I felt a type of way after she made some comments on the internet and to the press. So that's one fight I can't retire till I have.
And do you feel like you talk about it being a business, and I mean, you're very vocal. I'd say you're one of, if not the most vocal, um, women's fighter to talk about women's boxing and how it's incredibly unequal and the pay is horrific. And you've talked about that a lot, and we'll maybe go into a little after. Um, but do you still like have some kind of pleasure to when you step into the boxing ring? Because at the same time, like, I would imagine when there's so much dirty politics behind it, getting in, you maybe sometimes feel like, why am I doing this? Why am I still here?
I'll be honest. After the last when I had gotten the MMA cage in June, I was really fed up. Like almost like like when you leave your boyfriend who cheated on you the last time, you're like, I'm done. I'm not going back. That's really how I felt about boxing. I was so disappointed. Tired of getting my hopes up only to be disappointed, But something about being in a boxing ring, that's home to me. I came off this MMA fight thinking like I didn't want to fight anymore. And within 2 sparring sessions, the guys are like, okay, she's back.
And what's also interesting is for you, and I'm kind of curious, is you've gone from boxing to Bellator to boxing again to Bellator again, and 2-2 in MMA. I don't think people understand how difficult it is to go from boxing to MMA, but you're 22-0, undefeated as a professional boxer. Is it weird when like in this last instance, coming off a loss, and you go back to another sport and you're like, holy shit, I'm a world champion? Is there a mental, I mean, I don't think you lose confidence, but is there something that you have to switch back on after coming off of a loss in a sport that, is not what you're
That's a good question. Nobody ever asked me that before. And it's something that I just realized after my last fight. So when I go into the cage in MMA, it's not like I ever went into MMA and said, I'm the best at this. I'm so good at this, right? I said, I'm going to see how far my boxing can beat the girl. So every time I would go in the cage to do my sparring sessions or travel around the gyms, it was always like my mentality was, you have to survive. Whatever this girl is going to do, because she wants to kill you, you have to survive and use your hands as much as you can. And when you switch back to a boxing ring, I wound up with that same mentality. And like after my first sparring session, I said to Blimp, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I forgot what I'm doing because I would just be standing there waiting for the girl to do something. It was my second sparring session that I was like, oh yeah, I'm good at this. I don't have to wait for her. So that's really the mental flip. And it didn't quite get out of my system yet because it was 4 months of being in the cage and being in these situations. But I'm confident that by my next fight, I'll be fine.
And talk to me a little bit about Blimp, who I had a lesson with him once too. He's great. He's a character.
Yeah.
But I was watching, I think it was today or yesterday, on your website, there's the 3 kind of short films that are all amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I must say, and for
Thank
people
you.
on, it's what is it, heather-hardy.com?
Yeah.
To go check them out. And one of them won a bunch of awards.
Mm-hmm.
Really well shot. But there's also a point, I think, I don't remember which one it was, but talks about how Blimp was kind of, he talked to Lou DiBella to get you on a card. Is it something like that?
Yeah, when I had my pro debut, it was at a time where they might have one women's fight on a show every 2 months, and Lou was one of the few people showcasing women, and Blimp's son was signed with Lou. So after the Golden Gloves, he saw my work ethic, he knew what I could do, and Blimp came to the gym one day and said, listen, my son is fighting. I talked to Lou. I told him you'd sell 10 grand in tickets. He said, if you could do that, I'll put you on the show. And I did it. And I never forgot that.
And you talk about, I think, that moment of, I mean, if there's something that with your boxing is one thing, of course, you're known for, but in the short time I've known you, your ability to sell tickets is phenomenal as well. But it's also, it says a lot about how disappointing it is in boxing, just because I think one of them, the first times when you sold, that time you're talking about selling $10,000 in tickets, your purse is what, $800?
Yeah, for my first fight, I actually sold $13,000 in tickets. and I made $800. And it kind of looked like that same typical numbers for like my first almost 10 fights, 8 to 10 fights, where I would make $1,200, $1,500 and sell upwards of $15,000 in tickets.
And does that motivate you potentially in your career after boxing to try to, would you go into maybe being a promoter or for female fighters?
No, I hate the business. I hate the business. The politics of boxing, they'll never change. And
Why not?
because that's what they've been since day one. And you have the same 10 guys who've been running boxing since Mike Tyson was a world champion. Nothing's going to change. Money stays in the same hands. It's a beautiful thing that women started to be able to box in the Olympics because promoters started to see the value. And I'm sure that over the next 10 years or so, as the Olympics, we have another couple of them and more, they're adding more weight classes for the girls. You're going to see more talent come out and be showcased on the cards, but it's going to be a long fight.
And there's also what most people don't know as well is your fight, the first Shelly Vincent fight. That was the first women's televised boxing bout in 25 years or something.
It was on a tape delay, so they played it later on that night. But NBC Sports was the first televised fight, and it was the first time Al Heyman. I was the first female he ever put on his shows on PBC. Al Heyman is very vocally anti-female fighting, and that was one of his shows too.
Why? Do you know why he's?
I wish I could say, but I don't know. I've had the Barclays Center go to bat for me with him and say, this girl sells tickets, she's good, and he just wants no part of it.
Did you ever have any doubts or moments where you're like fuck this, I'm done? How do you keep the motivation when you know all of this, and at the same time you're going out performing for them and they're getting rich kind of partially on your back?
It sounds so cliche to say it, but a lot of times you think of quitting because you feel like you have so much more to go, but you don't realize how far you've come. And whenever I ever felt like I don't want to do this anymore, I always think of how far I came from the beginning and how much I accomplished with so many people telling me I couldn't. People saying, you'll never box at the Barclays Center. You'll never fight at Madison Square Garden. You'll never fight on HBO. And I did all those things.
What's it like? Can you, for somebody that's never gone into a fight with someone or never into a ring, could you talk about what goes on in your mind when I think boxing and MMA are two very different things, I would imagine, as the way you approach it. Boxing feels more strategic. MMA feels more like a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Depends, I guess, on the boxing bout. But for you, what's going on in your head kind of during a boxing bout, and an MMA fight?
So in boxing, it's like business as usual, Excuse me. I would almost say it's like if you are doing your job, whatever you're really passionate about, I'm sure there are parts of your job that I couldn't do or that most people couldn't do. It's whatever is going through your mind is what goes through my mind. I'm not afraid of getting hit. I'm not afraid of anything anyone's going to do in boxing, because even though there are girls who are better than me, technically better than me, they're not going to surprise me. They're not going to do anything that I'm not ready for. In a cage, I'm always like, shit, what is this girl going to do? There are so many variables. There are so many takedowns. There are so many chokes. There are so many submissions. There are so many different kicks. What's the one thing this girl's been practicing so hard to take me out, knowing that all I have is boxing?
And after your last fight, do you feel any inclined to go back to MMA at all?
I don't want to rule it out, because if the opportunity is there, it's not to say like I lost any fans. Everybody who is my fan is like my fan. If I became a piano player, they would come watch me play piano. They just like me, and it's not for lack of trying, because part of the excitement with me being in MMA was like, can she do it? Can she do it, even though we know she can't do everything? So I wouldn't say I would rule it out. You never know. Like, if they want to send me to Ireland and go fight in Bellator Dublin, who's to say I would say no? I'm not really one to turn down a fight.
Do you have any? You talked about kind of having a few goals. What are some of your general goals? Are they mostly in boxing, or do you still, as you said, you're not going to rule out MMA? Do you have potential MMA goals?
Um, my goal from the beginning of my fight career was to provide my daughter with a life that I didn't grow up with, a life that I had to learn there was to live. Send her to a good school, keep her in a good neighborhood, have her available to do programs that she loves art, to be able to work in the studios, to go to a good college, and to never have to worry about money or things like that. Those are my goals. So I've gotten far past my other goals. Like when I started, my goals were to make myself known, to make women's boxing known, and a large part of it was due to the Olympics. But I like to think that I did my part, and I feel really satisfied by it, what I've accomplished so far. If I had to hang up my gloves right now, I wouldn't mind.
How has being a mother kind of changed you as a person and as a fighter?
Well, as a person, I always kind of grew up. I grew up in like a lower to working class neighborhood where growth isn't promoted, survival was. And I always felt myself to be really lucky because I had a vision. Like I wanted to go to college, I wanted to work in the city. I knew that the world was big, but I also realized that all the people around me only saw this small little place, people who never leave. They don't tell you to go to college, they give out city workers exams and make you take the post office test so that you can have a pension. And when I had a daughter, I realized it was my responsibility to make sure she doesn't turn out like that. Not to say that it's bad to be that way, but to never reach your full potential because of comfort is, I think, the saddest thing in life. I really do. So it became a bigger responsibility for me to expose my daughter to so many things so that she wasn't 28 years old when she found out her passion like I was, so that she could find it at 10 and use her whole life just making it better.
There's also, for people that don't know your life, and one of the aspects that I've always actually when I first learned about you, it was one of the aspects that I found most inspiring was how you found boxing and those kind of, I think it was the couple of years before that were kind of difficult. Will you kind of, for people that don't know, uh, talk to us about those few years leading up to boxing, and then kind of, because I know this story about how you got into boxing, but for people who don't know, how then you started boxing at 28 years old?
Well, I was going through a divorce mainly, and I was living with my sisters, two of us, single moms with no child support. And I was working like 6 jobs just to put food on the table. We had a tiny little apartment, and my sister would take care of the kids during the day so I could work. And they opened up a little karate school by my mom's house, and she got me a gift certificate. She said, "I'm tired of seeing you sit around. All you do is work and bitch." She said, "You have to have a little part of life." So they were open late at night. I'll come off the trains, 8 o'clock, and go right to training karate. Within 3 weeks, I had my first fight, and I won.
And it was a karate fight?
It was a kickboxing match, yeah.
And then boxing, what was your first boxing time just boxing?
It was about probably 6 or 7 months later. I went into Gleason's realizing I wanted to improve, that I was good at this, but I needed someone to teach me how to do it. And I went 0-2 in my first 2 fights in my boxing career. But I had a coach who didn't give up on me, and I believed in me, and we just kept at it. And within 18 months, I won every title you could win as an amateur.
What do you think, what was the moment that you knew, okay, this is what I'm going to do with my life?
It was when I won nationals. It was the first time I had ever been to Colorado. Actually, only second time I was ever on a plane. First time I ever saw like real mountains and stuff. And I was at the Olympic Training Center for nationals, and I beat up 5 girls and was ranked #1 in the country. I got a jacket, and they took pictures of me. And it was the first time even my family was like, wow, you're pretty good, aren't you? And my coach had said at the time, you have the potential to be so good that they'll remember 5 names in boxing: Holly Holm, Mia St. John, Layla Ali, and they'll talk about Heather Hardy. And he was right. I believe that.
What about so you said your family took them a little while to kind of realize like, oh, she's kind of good. In the beginning, were they supportive?
My mom was very supportive. She would be in the front row banging on the folding chairs, all my fights. My dad, though, would always he's very conservative. He's a deacon. Tell me, stay out of the gym, be a grown up. You have a family to take care of. Set an example. And then when I won nationals, he finally came around.
And there's also part of in the one of the documentaries on your site where you talk about like days where you could barely afford to get 2 eggs for your daughter. And I mean, I was about to cry, but but could you talk about when that's going on and you're still like kind of getting into boxing? How, you know, a lot of people would probably fold. How do you, was the motivation your daughter or was it something else as well?
It was well, of course, my daughter, because I really wanted to change her life and I really believed that I could. I think you have to believe that you can. And there were a million days like that where I would go home and just feel like I couldn't win. You know, the lights would go out, or my daughter I can remember her coming downstairs one of the days I broke down and she said, "Mommy, the TV doesn't work again." But it was because the cable got shut off, you know? And days I didn't feel like I could keep going, but I really believe that God puts you through the hurricane to get to the rainbow. And if you have to prove that you deserve it, that you want it, you have to get through all those hard days. It gets hard before it gets easy, for sure.
Do you remember maybe like the lowest day?
One of the lowest days was that Mommy, the TV got shut off again. I can remember that story about not having 2 eggs to crack. I remember getting home one night and like all of this sounds good, but try to keep in mind that I'm putting in days from 4:30 in the morning and not getting in home till 9 o'clock. And that's work combined with training, combined with work again, combined with training again. And so to still not make enough money to get all the things done that you need to get done, working as many hours, I just needed 6 more days. There was, can remember like just the look on my sister's face saying I had to go to Mommy's again for soup, you know.
And what kind of, you talk about doing a bunch of little jobs. What were some of the jobs that you were doing?
So they were all different times. Like I can barely remember some of them. I worked in the lighting district as a secretary. I used to do internet marketing, SEO. I was doing like Google campaigns for websites. I was teaching exercise classes like basements and church basements, every little place I could get. I was volunteering for USA Boxing, setting up matches and stuff as a matchmaker, but then Bruce had hired me at one point to answer the phones in the gym. Like I was delivering textbooks for Catholic schools and public schools. I had so many jobs.
And then what was your first introduction to Gleason's?
Well, after I left the karate school, I knew that there was only really 2 places, Starrett City Boxing or Gleason's. And Starrett City was too hard for me to get to, so I walked into Gleason's and Bruce was sitting at the front desk and I said I want to be a fighter. And he brought me right to Alicia Ashley, who was a world champion. And I met her and I said, I want to be a fighter. And she said, no, you want to be a boxer. And I'm going to show you how to do that.
Will you talk about the difference for someone that doesn't know? What's the difference between fighting and boxing?
Well, fighting is emotional. Boxing is strategic. It's like if you can watch 2 people boxing who know how to do it, it can be like a dance. Fighting is fight. Boxing is hit and don't get hit.
And which do you prefer now that you've done boxing and MMA? Just like strip all the politics aside, strip the fact that you're maybe less comfortable in MMA in terms of like the feelings of getting into the ring.
I love boxing. I love boxing.
And do you think in your post-fight career you want to continue? I mean, you know, you give lessons. You're coaching a lot of people, and I know you help a lot of up-and-coming fighters. Is that something you want to continue doing?
My long-term goal is to open my own gym, to have my own team of fighters. I mean, I see the way boxing changes lives, and I genuinely mean that. Women who've come to me getting out of abusive relationships, women who've come to me through divorce, men who grew up feeling like they were too weak or they weren't manly enough. And like I have some of the geekiest guys who are such good fighters now, and I see it changes lives. It really does. Fitness, the community, the sport of boxing, the togetherness, the family. I want that, and I can never imagine not being that.
Is there one particular story that's touched you the most that you can remember?
I have a lot, so to say that is hard. I had one girl who came to me. I'll probably cry. She was about, I want to say like, I might be misquoting her weight, but upwards of 250 pounds, probably 240, 250. She had just gotten out of an abusive relationship with her boyfriend. She could barely even do 10 squats, you know? And the boyfriend beat her a lot. She had no self-esteem. And within, I want to say 8 or 10 months, we got her down to 180 pounds. And she had her first fight. And she lost it, but she did so well. And she came to me in the locker room after. And she said, I know you don't know this, but the first 6 months I was coming here, I was in a really abusive relationship. My boyfriend was beating me. I felt like shit. But I want you to know that you will always be the one who got me out of it, who changed my life. And that's powerful. You know, that stuff sticks with me. And I have a lot of stories from my girls like that who I can just see their change, the community that they're given. It's something I never don't want.
And do you feel like since you've also been really, stories like that, but also you've been very vocal about a lot of other social issues, and very outspoken. I mean, amongst them, like besides the equal pay and the treatment of women in boxing. I mean, you touched on, topics like sexual assault and a lot of like really serious social issues. Do you feel like now that you're in a position of more so celebrity or people know your name, do you feel like you have a responsibility for the younger boys and girls and boys both?
I think that everyone with a microphone and an audience has a responsibility to speak up on the issues that they feel powerful about or strongly about. And one of the things about sexual assault, about poor body image, like, I'm as a woman, there are so many things I've faced in my life where the hardest part is having to feel like, A, it's my fault, and two, I'm all alone and no one understands. And when you have so many people who are writing to you saying, like, you inspire me, I want to be like you, people who follow my posts religiously, talk to me, I feel like it is my responsibility to not just talk about the fighting and the photo shoots and the radio, but to show them that I didn't come out of the box like this. This was a long process. I've dealt with a lot of really, really hard stuff and worked through a lot of issues, and to be able to tell people, like, you can come through. It's going to be hard, but you can get out on the other side and you can succeed. Everything from sexual assault to growing up in lower class neighborhood. I hate to say poor because we did grow up. Both my parents worked 2 jobs, but I, took my brother and sister back and forth to school, did their homework. Like, I don't want to say I raised them because my parents were around, but they were always working to just keep food on the table.
Is that what, other than your own personal motivations, do you feel like you fight for a greater purpose, and that's to inspire others?
I do, because there's nothing worse than shitty people, And I feel like anytime that I don't think I'm a bad person. I think I have good ideas, and I think that just in the little conversations I have with people, that my voice can help someone. And if you post something silly or make a video or do an interview and one person feels like, wow, that makes me feel better, then it's worth it, right? If it's just one person.
And how do you handle kind of negativity? Because especially, I mean, I've seen it personally, even in the last Bellator fight. I mean, people want to say, oh, you can't, you're bad on the ground, you're not, and they don't know. They don't, especially.
Well, sometimes I will address it publicly and own. See, when you own yourself and you're self-aware and you can own your own faults, and it makes it harder for other people to get at you. I can say I'm fat and I'm ugly and I'm old, and then it really takes the value off when someone tries to say it to me, right? When you agree with it.
Yeah.
So if I can say, like, sorry, guys, I know that wasn't really a technical fight, but I did my best, most people respect that. And I find that the people that don't are really just asking for attention. Like, I take that into consideration, too, that a lot of times you have people online where maybe 5% of my followers are just people who say bad things because it makes my friends and my fans go back at them, and they hope that maybe I'll say something and engage them in conversation. So a lot of times I will ignore all individual comments and maybe address some of the negativity publicly. Like for one, I can remember one vacation last year I took where I was laying on the beach in a bikini taking pictures, and people were just commenting on everything, on how fat I was, and I gained so much weight, and I have wrinkles on my face, and I have stretch marks, and I had to put out a post and say, yes, I have all of those things, but I'm still happy, so leave me alone.
I love it. Is there a fighter or a person in your career, or maybe that you know or don't know, that you would say, I mean, there's probably a few, but some of the most influential people in your career?
It's hard to say because I didn't grow up as a boxing fan. I grew up knowing how to fight, and it was like, hey, why don't you try boxing? People always say, like, what's your favorite fight? Who's your favorite fighter? It's so hard for me to say that because I got into it by fighting, not by looking at fighting and wanting to do it.
When was the first time you watched a boxing bout?
I was probably already a national champion. I'm being serious. Like, I never watched boxing growing up. It was never on the TV. My father didn't like it, you know? But I can say that the fighters around me influenced me. Like I not grew up, but came up in boxing, watching Alicia Ashley and Melissa Hernandez and Belinda Laraquente, who are some of the original OG female boxing world champions. And I grew up grew up in boxing, getting beat up by these girls and watching them box and saying, man, I hope one day I could be that good. And now I am. Now I have sparring sessions, and everyone does what they used to do with those girls, get the folding chairs and sit around the ring, and everybody watches and takes video. But those were the girls I looked up to.
And you also talk about how when you were younger, you had dreams of playing for the New York Yankees.
Yeah, I was always a tomboy.
Do you, in another life, do you think is baseball what your other passion, or where do you think you'd be doing if it weren't boxing at this point in your life?
I have my degree in forensics, so I'd probably be in the FBI, somewhere fighting crime, traveling the world. I think that my calling wasn't as a boxer, but it was an advocate for justice. I'm being serious. Like my boxing career really took off, not because I was this incredible fighter that people were taken back by, but because I refused to allow my gender to hold me back in a sport that I was good at.
And where do you see women's boxing 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line? I mean, now there's people, I mean, you were really, at least for mine, what's sad is I think I also heard you say this in an interview recently. People, if Bud Crawford walked on the subway, no one would know who he is,
For sure.
which is crazy.
And it's true.
Pound for, yeah, it's very true.
Yeah.
He's pound for pound, maybe the best boxer in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like, you know, people started knowing about you. Now people know Clarissa Shields and Katie Taylor. And, you know, I mean, for the mainstream, that's probably all they know. They know you, Clarissa, Katie Taylor. Where, you know, that's kind of what it is. Where do you hope and where do you realistically think that 5 or 10 years down the line boxing goes?
Well,
women's boxing.
2012 was the first year, I said this before, that the girls could box in the Olympics, and they only allowed 3 weight classes. So what you had in 2011 was all of this incredible talent in the USA boxing team scattering into those 3 weight classes. You had 119 pounders sucking down to get to 112. You had 125s fighting at 132. You had 141s all the way jumping up, some of them jumping up to 165, some of them going down. So there was a scattering. So where you could have had maybe 10 or 15 girls right now who you know their names because they've all represented the weight classes and maybe would win, you only have 3. You have, you know, Katie Taylor and Clarissa Shields. Over in the UK, you have Nicola Adams, who was you have Marlon Esparza. There's quite a small handful of the Olympians that take, like, you know, the public eye because they've been snatched up and signed by promoters. The more the Olympics expand the weight classes, the more talent that comes out of each grade of Olympians, the more respect you'll start having for women's boxing. The more women you'll have signed to cards and showcased. I mean, now you had Katie Taylor fight Delphine Persoon. Delphine was 42-1. This is the first fight that anyone knew who she was because no one really cared before. So you're also going to see great fighters coming out of the woodworks to fight these Olympians, which is going to make for more opportunities. Now everyone knows who Delphine is and can't wait to see her rematch against Katie. So it's just things like that.
It's also crazy. I mean, you have, you're undefeated, Claressa's undefeated, and it's still, I mean, I think Claressa, she was maybe like one of the first women to headline a card recently, I think.
She's the first female ever to headline a Showbox, the Showtime card. She was, I think, one of the first females to. She's been the first to do so much. She's like the first boxer, male or female.
She's so young.
And she's such a sweet kid. I really have. I've known her since I was in the amateurs. We were in the amateurs together. And one thing I can say is her focus is second to none. And it always was. Her discipline and her focus at such a young age to be a 2-time Olympic gold medalist. No man's ever done that.
And she's like a 5-time champion now or something.
Undisputed, yeah.
But I want to go back to something you were talking about with regards to weight classes and kind of weight cutting. How different is, in your experience, a weight cut in MMA and in boxing? And do you cut the same kind of weight?
It's no different at all. I mean, a weight cut is a weight cut. It gets harder as you get older, and I'm learning that now. When I started my career, I used to walk around at like 120, and then it was 123, and then it was 125, and then it was... like now my weight is getting up there, and it's not necessarily because I'm this big fat human, but it's because that's what happens to women. The other side of 35, especially when you have kids, is not very kind to you on weight loss. I used to be able to cut 12 pounds in a week. Now it takes me a month and a half and 2 sacrifices. I got to go to church.
And do you think that do you agree with weight cutting? Because there's been a lot of talk that, especially in MMA and some organizations, that they're just going to completely strip it because it's so unhealthy.
I mean, it is unhealthy, but you have to understand a lot of us, fighters are split into 2 categories, athletes and fighters. So you have athletes who are like real, like fine-tuned machines. Their whole life is what I eat, how much I sleep, how much I rest, how much I stay in recovery. I'm a fighter. I'm just trying to put food on the table for my kid. Still work a full-time job. Try to tell me to get 8 hours of sleep at night, and I'll tell you, okay, who's going to come over and do homework with my kid, get the laundry done? It's not like you can go away to a fight camp and have this nice meals made for you. It's not always like that for all of us. So some of us have to cut weight.
And take us through a boxing training camp. What do your camps usually look like?
Well, I train with 2 trainers, Devon Cormack, who's my main coach, and he's been my coach since my very first amateur fight, and Blimp, who is always like my boxing conditioning coach. He would do drills with me, teach me different stuff. Like, I like to have a different look. So I usually do Devon in the morning, Blimp in the afternoon. Sessions could go 1 to 2 hours, depending on. I do strength and conditioning training 3 to 4 times a week. And I run every single day, about 3.5 miles.
You do both bridges?
Both bridges every day.
And then how different is it when you go transition to MMA?
Extremely. It's so challenging. First of all, I have to go to a different gym. And it's doing everything from kickboxing workouts, kickboxing sparring, drilling wrestling and jiu-jitsu, doing cage wrestling, doing wrestling sparring, doing full MMA sparring, trying to get boxing sparring still in because you never know when I'm going to be back in the ring. Still doing my boxing training. It's a lot of running around. I stick with my conditioning. I still have to run. So it's a lot more traveling for me.
Do you have a favorite moment of probably in the ring, I'd imagine?
Actually, it was in the cage. For my pro debut for MMA, I remember being on my knees after I knocked the girl out. I was on my knees, and I looked up, and I could hear every person in Madison Square Garden saying, "Hardy, Hardy." And it was like the single most satisfying moment of my life.
What's it like performing at the Garden?
Sometimes the magnitude of it doesn't hit me until I'm walking to the cage or I'm walking to the ring. Like, I'm at the Garden. I remember when I did my first fight at the Barclays, my father went up to get like a beer or something, and they have all the TVs like this size around the concession, and he said, I looked, and down the whole hall was your face. And I said to myself, my kid's face is on every TV at the Barclays Center. Little moments like that, you don't realize how big it is till you're there.
Has it ever like have you ever had that one moment where it kind of all hits you at once like, "Whoa, I'm a world boxing champion."
Usually when I'm in the locker room right before the fight, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. What are you doing?
Do you have any superstitions or rituals that you do before you go out?
Well, I always have Girl on Fire playing. That's for sure. And like we've had fights where we forgot to tell the DJ and it's just chaos. Me sending someone running around the Barclays trying to find one of the promotion to make sure they played the right version of my song. Um, Outside of that, not really. Like I just like to fuel. I hydrate with Pedialyte, same colors, orange and purple.
Who tapes you up?
I'm Devon. And for MMA, they give you their own guys to rap because it's a different tape with different gloves.
And kind of talking about you know, being a mom. How do you're in the ring beating a girl up, then you go right out and I know you like you're very sweet. Like it's how do you kind of turn that off or channel it, or do you not really turn it off? It's just
I don't turn it off. People always are so surprised that I'm soft spoken, that I'm calm, that I'm not like jumpy and agitated. But it's my job. I don't hate these girls that I fight. Half the time we hug before and after. We giggle at the face offs. This is our job. We do this because we love martial arts. We love the competition. We go in there like we want to kill each other because we're both aware that the both of us have put in a full fight camp trying to win, trying our competitive spirit.
we talk about. I always think it's interesting. I mean, I think you've probably had a few opponents that you maybe aren't huge fans of, but I mean, you see some MMA guys, especially boxing too, they just don't like each other.
Yeah.
But you always see after at the end, there's always like a sense of respect. We talk about what it's like after going maybe 10 or 12 rounds with somebody, and then that you share a special moment. But I don't know what it is because I've never experienced it, but you have. Could you kind of talk about what that feeling is like when you've shared the ring with someone like that and you've punched them in the face for 20 minutes?
Well, and the best example I can give is my fight with Shelly, my first one. Like there was tons leading up to it. She had decided that her career was going to be based on getting all her people to hate me, saying I didn't deserve it, right? To hype up this big fight. And she did a great job of it because, and it was genuine. She genuinely didn't like me. And that fight was an all-out war for 10 rounds. I mean, we just pounded on each other. And when you come out of 10 rounds fighting as hard as you can and standing for a decision, like a piece of your soul comes out in that ring. Like, you're both saying, I am never going to let you beat me. I'm going to do everything I can. So, like, a couple months after, she was talking some trash online. I was like, girl, you love me. You can't even fake it no more. And we actually became pretty decent friends after, even before our last fight.
Have you hung out with any of the fighters that you fought afterwards?
Yeah, actually there was a girl, forgive me if I don't remember her name. Renata maybe. We had a drink after I stopped her. And Noemi and I did a couple fights, and there was like some time in the back room where we, hugged and respect and still kind of interact on social media because we have that social media. But outside of that, not too much. None of my opponents are really from New York, so.
And we kind of also, I'm interested in your mentality and if it's changed from when you first started boxing to now.
Well, when I first started, I wanted to be a world champion and I wanted everyone to know who I am. And I did a pretty good job of that. Now at this point, it's more like if I'm not making some money, I'm not getting out of bed. So I'm waiting for those offers to come in. Otherwise, I'm not going in and doing a tune-up fight. Canelo released a statement today where he said, I'm a world champion. I know that I always box in May and September, but I don't have an opponent that's going to be quality. And I'm not putting on that show for my fans. And, people are going crazy, but I respect that so much because I feel the same way. I'm not going to have some girl who's 10-10 come defend my title, sell tickets, make a little bit of money. Like, that's not what I want to do anymore. I won the world title against the number 2 contender. If you can't show me money, I don't need to hold on to it. I already won it. You can take it back if you want. I'm not fighting a nobody just to keep it.
Do you? I mean, you talked about a few fights that you could be interested before. Are there? I mean, is Katie Taylor? Would
Yeah,
you be interested in that?
we're like mid negotiations for that, for me going up a couple weight classes and being one of Katie's opponents. The Irish people love me, and it's a really interesting dynamic because so many of them have wrote articles and said, we love Katie, but we love Heather too. So nobody loses, it's going to be a great fight.
Do you feel your Irish heritage when you're fighting? That
I do because it's something I'm very proud of. Like, I think everybody is kind of proud of where their family is from and the struggle that it took for our ancestors, people, who came here to make this life for us and to have that platform on television where everyone sees me and everyone is screaming my name. I can't not pay tribute to my grandmother and how hard she fought to get us here. My grandmother used to talk about, living in this small little 1-bedroom place with 8 brothers and sisters and her fiance and her first 2 kids, and she used to stand in line for cheese and milk and bread just to feed the family. So you have to pay respects to what your grandmother and your family is so proud of bringing you here.
have you been to Ireland?
Never. It's my dream.
So
Go see where grandma's from.
so would you? I mean, a fight there is.
Oh,
You'd be very
it
interested.
would be. I would love to go home. I have a lot of fans in Ireland, so I'd love to be able to put on for the Irish.
Are there any other places that you want to fight at before you retire?
I remember when Floyd used to fight at the MGM. I used to, like, my dream was to fight on one of his undercards, but it doesn't look like that's gonna happen anymore. They're not putting like super exciting fights on at the MGM anymore. So just being at the Garden and the Barclays, like, what more could I really ask for?
And I'm also curious, with regards to MMA, are you only allowed to fight under Bellator, or are you
I'm only allowed to fight under Bellator.
okay.
I am contracted to them for my MMA career.
Is there a certain amount of fights that you are contracted to them, or it's just
I
indefinite?
think it was like a length of time. It's like, don't quote me, but I think it was a length of time that I signed for. And it was it's a really interesting contract because most martial arts and combat sports don't allow you to have 2 contracts because if you get hurt, then the other one suffers. So this one was kind of set up that, okay, I can't do any other MMA fights with any other corporation, but when I'm ready to do an MMA fight, I can tell Bellator and they'll put me on a show.
Gotcha.
So it's super flexible.
But they didn't, just because you went to your last Bellator fight, they didn't strip you of your WBO.
No, they couldn't.
So you're still the current
Yes,
WBO.
I'm still the current WBO world champion.
What's that? When you say that, what does that trigger?
I wish it triggered more, but I was never really one for trophies. For me, it was more winning the fight. There was talk that I was going to get stripped, and my manager went crazy. And I was just like, I don't care. If I want it, I'll just fight the girl who wins it. I don't. You can never take from me that moment of winning it on HBO and walking out of the Garden with it. Outside of that, you can have the fucking thing. It don't mean shit anymore.
We'll take a quick break because we need to talk about one of my sponsors really quickly. Support for Where's This Going comes from Manscaped, who is #1 in men's below the belt grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaping accidents are finally a thing of the past. That's why Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. The Lawnmower 2.0 has proprietary skin-safe technology, so this trimmer won't nick or snag your cojones. Manscaped has also the Crop Preserver, an anti-chafing ball deodorant moisturizer. You already put deodorant on your armpits. Why are you not putting deodorant on the smelliest part of your body? And please, please do not use the same trimmer on your face that you are using on your balls. That's just absolutely disgusting. They also have the Perfect Package 2.0 that comes with about every tool and necessary cream or lotion to accommodate all of your needs. It also comes with a lovely leather travel bag as a complimentary gift when you buy it today. And also want to give them a big shout out and thank you as they sent me this incredibly comfortable Manscaped underwear that I would highly recommend getting, that you can directly find on their website. They're called the Manscaped Boxers, and they use breathable smart band technology that features super elasticity and a wide no-roll waistband for maximum support. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code WTG at manscaped.com. Always use the right tools for the job. get 20% off, as I mentioned. That code is WTG, and you can use that directly on manscaped.com for everything on the website. So before I leave you in a few minutes, I kind of am interested in, you've already done a lot, especially, in the last decade. What do you hope to do in the next decade?
I think the next part of my life, I'd like to open up my own gym and dedicate that to working with young people, charity. I love Gleason's has Give a Kid a Dream. It's a boxing charity. We take inner city kids off the street. And I've seen it change lives. Kids who are in the system who are now accountants and graduated college. And I've seen them go to the Golden Gloves. Kids who call me mom, who grew up like my babies are now pros. I love that idea. I love to be able to give back and just have a community of people who can use boxing to bring out their better selves.
And when people will remember Heather Hardy, what do you want them to be thinking about?
How tough I am and how easy it is to be tough. You just got to do it.
Heather, thank you so much for being here. As I said in the beginning, you're an inspiration for all of us, boys and girls, and I'm very honored to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is fun.